best. Over here, I'm a Boglin. Me and my buddies need a place to hide out. Come a little closer. Oh, did I scare you? Oh, I do that so well. If you take us home, we'll kiss your Aunt Martha. We'll eat your peas. And we hope you know lots of girls. Hey, the name's Boglins, each sold separately, and we're looking for good homes. Maybe yours?
All right, and welcome to a special edition of Ask an Engineer.
We're here with Tim Clarke, who's a master toy designer and crafter and sculptor, and also known as the King of Gross. I'm, I guess, the queen of making or something.
Queen of open source, I think you've been called.
So, welcome. It's cool to have someone who's not an engineer. I mean, you're an engineer of sorts, but you're not an electrical engineer.
That's very true.
You're like a sculpting engineer, but you were in town for some stuff, and you were like, hey, I want to come by the Adafruit factory.
Yeah, we'll tell
and
the story.
Said, heck yeah.
This is a really neat story.
Tell the story.
But no, we're going to get to it.
Oh, okay.
So we have all these interesting things from Tim's past, present, and future, so I thought we would just kick it off. So before we get going, if anyone wants to see Tim's work, go to TOTIMS.com, and then you can also go to your Instagram, which is, we'll get to this later, that's how we met. So,
correct.
You know, the internet is crummy for a lot of things, but this actually worked out.
No, it's amazing.
Yeah.
Check out these cool, custom, gross pocket animals.
And I'm a customer, and we'll talk about that soon. But if folks want to see kind of the process of how these things are made and what you're up to, that's how I keep track of you now. And I think it's really neat that you show the inspiration of things, the mold making, the casting, the going to the events, and then also a lot of nods to the past as things have come up. Darkcrystal is out now.
Yes.
You worked on the original one. There's all sorts of things that have happened. So it's almost like looking into a lot of our past and a lot of our history if you're, you know, around this age or so, or if you're just discovering this for the first time.
It's very true. It's like very interesting how things in my life are going in cycles, and that like specifically with Darkcrystal coming out around the same time as the relaunch of Boglins.
Yeah.
And the relaunch of Boglins happened mainly because so many people started pestering me online. Why don't you bring them back? Why don't you bring them back? And I said I've been trying to get a toy company to pick it up.
Yeah.
But nobody was all that interested.
Yeah.
And then they said to me, well, why don't you just do it yourself? And I was like going, well, it's not that easy, you know?
Yeah.
But after about 3 months of playing with different synthetic rubbers, I found something that I could cast myself easily and wasn't cost prohibitive. And and then I worked with the factory that produces the plastic to get it to the consistency that I wanted.
It does sound like you're probably in a similar business as us. We can commiserate later about what it's like working with suppliers and stuff. But I thought, since once I contacted you, I looked around and I'm just like, okay, let me make sure I get the full story. So let's start out. So here's you. And when was this and what were you doing?
That was after Darkcrystal. That was the beginning of working on traveling mat for Fraggle Rock.
Okay, so you worked on Fraggle Rock as well.
Yes.
And I found some of these other, I guess I'd say portfolio pieces, but these are some of the Muppets that you worked on as well?
Yeah, that's an anglerfish puppet that I carved out of a single block of urethane foam. And then...
anglers are cool, so you're coming back to that as well. The purple
There's
angler.
there's a theme.
Yes. Oh, yeah,
There's
definitely.
a theme,
No, there's definitely forms that fascinate me.
I mean, this is kind of awesome and ridiculous. Like, what's going on here? Bong.
Yeah, but it's even great because it's got a floating eyeball at the top.
And what's neat, and we'll talk about this in a bit, is I think all of us have a lens that we look at, and when we recently released some of our electronics, I got tossed back to being an 80s kid, and I'm just like, you know what? I finally can put eyes in a Boglin, and it hit like that. And it's just like I happen to have a Boglin. I'm just like, okay, and like everything started to work out. So I guess since it's Darkcrystal season, I keep trying to catch it on Netflix, but we get really tired at night.
Yeah, well.
And so, but it's always on.
You and me both.
Yeah, I'm just.
I think I'm only into I'm into number 7
Yeah, someone
in the
said
series. I haven't finished it
It's
yet.
like Game of Thrones, but with puppets. It's like the prequel to Game.
Yeah,
of
in some ways I can see that.
I think because it just means it has a big story.
Yes.
It's like, oh, we have these characters.
They
names.
they needed to expand on it.
Yeah.
You know, if it was going to be successful over, 10 different shows. It's a lot.
That's a big story.
You know? I mean, we did one movie. They did like 10 movies.
It is.
Yeah.
Each
Incredible.
one's like a movie.
The budgets are incredible,
With the bigger
too.
budget per.
Yeah, well, they had 3,000 people working on that movie.
Yeah. So this was the Mystic.
Series.
This is one of the original ones that
Yep.
worked on this.
That's Brian Froud's sketch for The Dying Master, and then my sculpt underneath it. That was a photo I took. Sorry.
It's a really close adaptation.
Well,
You really captured the texture.
I hope so.
I think so.
It's always a balancing act to go from 2 dimensions to 3
Right.
dimensions, and
What
the
kind of
perception
materials
of what of how something turns, a corner.
Yeah.
Like the classic thing was that I asked Brian multiple times to please give me a head-on view of the Mystic,
Yeah.
and he said, "Tim, his nose is just so long, I can't do it."
Yeah, because it's almost like a circle. It's hard to.
Yeah,
it's
and
hard
he
to
said,
sketch
I
that.
can give you the side view. He said, I can give you the other side. And then after a while, he didn't even give me the opposing side. He would just give me always the left side of the face.
Yeah.
And then it was up for me to create the wrinkles and lines in the opposite side.
If you
on
can
the
make
right
this
side.
in 3D, it'll all work out.
Yeah, and then he would come and look at it and go, yeah, okay, this looks really good, or tweak this a little bit, or sometimes he thought I was making the spirals too I don't know.
Tight?
Yeah, no, or just too they weren't broken up enough. He wanted them to be
too perfect.
Yeah, he wanted them to be
Almost like
really
like a tattoo. You don't want it to be like.
falling into the wrinkles. He didn't
Yeah.
want them to stand out. He wanted them to be really an organic part. And one of the funny things is when at the time that I was sculpting most of these, we were in London, and I would get on the underground, and little old ladies would come in and sit, across from me on the
You'd be like,
underground.
"I'm
And I wouldn't draw. I would just be like, oh wow, she's got really good wrinkles. And I would look at their hands, because of the wrinkles on their hands.
Yeah.
And my wife was sitting next to me, and she jabs me in the wrist. She said, "What are you doing?" I said, "She has really beautiful wrinkles." She said, and my wife said to me, it's bad enough to have a husband who looks at other women, but looks at old women. This is not good.
That's right.
Well, you could always just turn to her and say, well, you have no wrinkles, so I can't be inspired.
Yeah.
Right.
Your skin is
No.
perfectly smooth. Like,
Yes.
So the
Porcelain.
other picture I found. This is kind of one of the more iconic Henson photos. So you worked with Jim Henson.
Yes,
That
directly.
and that was I think one of the things that got you here. That was
Yes.
an inspiration. And
Always,
someone,
still is.
Yeah, and before we started talking today, I was saying how like even Henson influenced how we do things at Adafruit with our content and how we do things with our puppets.
Yep.
And all that. So how did all this come about, and what were you doing with Jim?
Well, I had been working for Kermit Love, and Kermit is the guy who designed Big Bird and Snuffleupagus, and he had his own workshop. But when I was at Pratt, I got into Kermit's class the last semester of my senior year, and I was determined to outdo everybody else on in that class. Not that I thought that it was going to lead to a job, because I was going to graduate and go teach. And towards the end of the semester, Kermit said to me, "What are you doing after you graduate?" And I said, "Well, I'm looking for a teaching job, but there aren't a lot right now." And he said, "Well, why don't you come and work for me?" And I didn't hesitate. I just like, "Okay, yes."
Yeah, that's going on.
I'll be there, So when I worked for Kermit, Kermit started out as a costume designer, mostly for New York City Ballet and Joffrey and Twyla Tharp, and he was doing all kinds of costume design. So when I worked for him, we did like a 20-foot high marionette for Don Quixote when it goes from the windmill to turning into a giant. So that was really cool because it was the first time I think I ever saw a stage piece, a set piece, stop the ballet and get an applause.
Oh, neat.
It literally, people just were like so amazed by this thing popping up from the floor because it was all folded back and forth, and it was plywood, and it popped up from the ground, and then it swept its arm with a big mace across the stage, and Don Quixote's battling with it, and it was really remarkable. And we also did for Joffrey, we did the reconstruction of Picasso's Parade costume. So it was, and then we would do puppets for TV commercials, and then we would do puppets for Sesame Street overseas. So it was a constant flux, and then towards the end of a year working for Kermit, I went to talk to him about getting an interview with Jim. And I walked into his classroom at Pratt, and he said, "Oh, I'm so glad you came here, because Muppets is starting up this new project, and I think you'd be perfect for it." And you're going to go up, and it was so strange. It was like he was reading my mind. He said, "You're going to go up and meet, interview with Jim next
What's the Jim Henson
Tuesday."
interview like?
No, it was next Thursday. He said the following Thursday, and I said, "Okay."
What is that like? 'Cause he was well known, right? Like,
very
so
well.
that's where you wanted to be.
Yes.
So how do you even prep for an interview? Like, okay, like here's my costumes that I made. Here's my.
All the puppets I had done while I was at Pratt in Kermit's class, plus in between projects with Kermit, I would make puppets on the side, just whatever I was thinking about or playing around with different ideas. And one of those puppets actually became the inspiration for Sectaurs. But then I took all of those things, and I didn't know what to put them in, because I had this dragon that was like 12 feet long that went from one hand to the other and moved like this, and my head was the bump in his back.
Yeah.
And so I had all this stuff, and I was like, what am I? And so I just put them all in garbage bags. And I got on the subway, and I walked into the Henson studio, and then, I walked, they told me to come up to, I think it was the 4th floor, and, it's the workshop, and they said, "Oh, just put your stuff over there, Jim will be here in a little while." And he came in, and so he said, "Okay, what do you have to show me?" And I just started pulling these things. And the thing I remember most is Jim said, and what also Kermit had told me, is I really love the fact that you are thinking about using your body, your whole body.
Putting the whole costume in there.
And that you are using your hands in a different way than doing this, which is, the classic Muppet thing.
Yeah.
So like the first thing I made in Kermit's class was a crab, and the eyeballs were on the end of my thumbs, and then I made extensions off my fingers that were his legs, and a hard shell across his back and on the bottom, and it moved this way.
Yeah.
So
it wasn't just the normal Grover style. Yeah,
right.
Like,
so Jim said to me, he said, this is wonderful what you're doing. It fits right in with what I'm looking to go towards. And another one was a sea anemone that was just like a tube with fur fabric on the bottom that looked like seaweed. That I had painted green, dyed green and blue, and then it was a pink cylinder, and then at the top it was all these really thin pieces of foam that I had rolled into, like tubes that were pointed. And I had magic markered them to change the color I dyed the foam and then magic markered the tips to change the color. And, it came up through the tube and opened, and it had eyes along the edge.
Oh, that's nice.
And,
more circular
that became,
stuff.
that became in the movie Dark Crystal, we basically, Sherry Amott and I took an entire jumpsuit and covered it with these tubes. that were orange, and you see them scurry when Jen is walking through the mountains. You see them, contract back into.
Oh, this is great because now I'm going to watch the movie again, knowing some of these stories.
Yeah, and actually, I think it's probably one of the few things that's in the movie that Kermit didn't. That Brian didn't conceive of. It was something that was just, brought from that puppet, and Jim really liked it, and he said, he commented on all the different things I was doing.
All right, so it sounds like you got the job.
Oh yeah. And then when I finished showing him everything, he said, "Okay, when can you start?" And I said, "Tomorrow." And he said, "No, I have to talk to HR. Why don't you come back, on Tuesday, and you can sign papers and stuff."
Gotcha. Okay, so you were working there for a while, and one of the reasons you're here is because Boglins, and so I dug up. Internet's kind of nice because you can find almost anything. So
Correct.
This is what I found online, and I believe these are some of the first concepts of what Boglins are.
Yeah, the one on the bottom, the green one, is the very first Boglin that I sculpted and make the mold, and he's made out of foam latex, which is what all the puppets in Dark Crystal were made out of, or predominantly were made out of, and I made an eye mechanism so that he would blink. His eyes didn't track back and forth at that time, and his mouth open and closed. And he did have a hand that could grab things. I put a little lever in his tail.
It was like an armature.
And it was all just tubes.
Like a tendon?
Yeah, and latex tubing.
Yeah.
And then it had lines to it, so it would contract and grab things.
Yeah.
But that was not cost effective for Mattel to produce. But
it's a lot of hand labor because you have to thread it so carefully.
Yeah, well.
Yeah.
That's one of the things I want to talk to you guys about. Is
how do you make stuff?
So I think the big thing for me is, especially looking back now, it's not the fact that like there was this period of time in toys in the 80s where it was like gross toys like Mad Balls and Garbage Pail Kids. It's the fact that you brought advanced puppeteering from Henson world to the masses, and I think that's one of the stories I haven't heard. It's like that to me was like, oh my gosh. And I remember I was an only child and foster care and all this stuff, but this is one of the things I really love because I could make my own puppet shows. I saw things like the Muppets. I'm like, I love that. That's neat. How can I build something like that? And it was really hard to do. But then this came out, and it was like Hollywood level special effects in a box. Right. And I just wanted to know, like, how did you say, like, I know I want to make like dark crystal style puppets and get it to the masses? Like, what was how did you get to that?
It's hard for me sometimes to remember the exact connection. I know Maureen Trotto and I were doing television commercials at the time. We had done a Pizza Head for Banaka commercial, and we had done, implying that the guy had pizza breath. And it's funny because Jason Alexander was the Pizza Head in that commercial before Seinfeld.
He's been around for a while.
Yeah. And then another thing that Maureen and I worked on was, which I think you can find on the internet, was the Wicked Itch. It was a foam latex witch that Maureen had sculpted, and I did the eye mechanisms for. And it was for Lanacine. And you rubbed Lanacine on and you got rid of the Wicked Itch. And and she just vaporized basically. But when we were working with Seven Towns, the agent at Seven Towns at that time, Larry Mass, said, like, he saw the witch and he said, oh, like you guys. And I said, well, yeah, what did you think I've been doing? I don't think he had ever seen Dark Crystal nor made the connection. But I said, yeah, that's what I want to do is, take that kind of technique and push it forward. And Maureen and I then started working on Boglins, concept sketches, and actually with him, I just sculpted him. I don't even remember drawing initially.
Yeah,
I just sculpted him up, and I think that year at Toy Fair, or beforehand Toy Fair, we had showed it to Coleco because Coleco had already been producing Sectaurs. And they wanted to use it as a nemesis, like a monster within the Sectaurs world. But then they ran into financial problems because of Atom Computer. And
I was actually shocked to Phil. Like, it's weird that there's like two leather companies that got into computers, like Tandy and Coleco.
Yeah.
Weird, right?
Yeah.
It was like, hey, we do leather. Let's also get into, personal computing.
Yeah, and that was part of the problem. It's
Yeah,
They really did not have any idea what they were getting themselves into. Plus, the management style at Coleco was not really good. They kind of pitted design and engineering against each other, which I never quite understood that. It's like, how are you going to design a computer if
everyone doesn't get along?
It was
or
very
like Apple
strange.
was like when they married the two perfectly, design.
Exactly.
So you got this Boglin, and then so you pitched it around, and then eventually it got picked up because
then it was showed to Mattel the following year,
and then Boglins,
and they got it right away. It's like as soon as they saw it, one of the executives at Mattel said, "Oh my God, this has been staring us in the face in movies, and we've just never."
Yeah, there was Ghoulies. There's all these things, and they look.
We actually did Boglins before Gremlins came out.
Yeah,
but then it's the time
Good
period.
timing, because it takes 9 months.
And it actually, we were very lucky because Gremlins came out that summer, and Boglins came out in the fall.
Yeah.
And there were no Gremlins licensed. So it's like all these kids, and when Maureen and I went to see Gremlins, we said, oh, forget it. Boglins is not going to go anywhere.
Yeah.
But we were just very lucky that they didn't launch Gremlins as a toy product till the year after.
Yeah.
So we got caught up in all of that,
Yeah.
But
it's weird how there was a period of time where all this was happening at once.
yes.
Like I don't want to say gross toys, but like that's just one way to. It's like, oh yeah,
It
gross
is.
toys. Yeah, there's like the Gremlins. Gizmo was cute.
Slime is back, but
Yeah,
slime was pretty big then, too.
Yeah,
Remember,
there was
getting
slimy,
balls
gross
of
things.
slime.
Ghostbusters came out. There was Slimer.
Yes.
There was Mad Balls. I just remember
Yeah.
it was just like everything was happening all
Was
at
Garbage
once.
Pail Kids before or after this?
after, I
After.
believe.
Okay, so this was, you actually were like a pre-gross, gross.
No, that's why it's King of Gross.
You're like the initiator of the
Hence the
gross.
title.
It's King Gross.
And that was given to me by the head of licensing.
That's
at
cool that
Muppets.
you were so forward-thinking. You were like, oh, we now have the materials to make these gross.
Well, that's
Like,
what-
it wasn't hard plastic; it was this rubbery, squishy, very tactile.
I was going to ask you about this because this is very unique packaging. They're in a cage, and
Yeah.
let's go to the.
And the packaging is
And
so
that
cool.
was, and Maureen's husband,
So you
who
could spin it
was
around
a
there.
theater designer. Whoop.
Yeah. So this is
Wait, no, I'm
yeah.
gonna
So
leave
this
it.
is
There we go.
they came in a cage, and underneath it there's a hole, so
Yeah.
you can
So you
stick
can put your hand in.
and you gave all the instructions on how to operate
Yeah.
a puppet. Here you go, kid. Now you're Jim Henson.
Yeah.
I love how it's like you don't even need to know how to read English. It's great for any market. For
Yeah.
kids who are young, they can
Well,
look
that's
at the photos
important,
and they're
especially when you're going to Europe to license stuff.
Yeah.
So that you can put your hand
But I love how
in.
it's the prop, but it's also the stage. Like, you give them everything they need to get started.
Yeah.
Like, you don't
Exactly.
Yeah, you want to get them to buy other stuff, but like
Yeah.
this is it. Like, you have a full story here.
And then on the back is the cross-sell of
Yeah.
Yeah.
done
I love
as if
this drawing style.
Yes.
And I wanted
No,
to
they did a
show-
great job. Maureen's husband actually designed the first of these crate boxes, Dwayne
So,
Langenwalter.
This is another big
He
piece.
came up with this concept to
of
package them.
Boglins
And
that-
they copied it almost exactly.
Yeah, and the thing, and again, it's like when I was looking around on the internet, everyone was like, "Oh, Boglins, like these toys from the '80s," and I really was excited that you're going to be here because I thought there was two parts of this story that I just haven't seen people talk about. One is bringing Hollywood special effects to the masses. The other one is I read Dune as a youngin.
Yeah.
Totally messed me up. But I remember thinking, boy, this is a great farming and horticulture book because it was more about like ecology of a planet.
Yeah.
But yeah, there was like this other stuff, and I'm like, that's cool. Like, I'd like to like farm a planet for spice. As a 4-H farm kid too. So
Right.
I looked at it with a different lens. But I remember thinking like, the cool thing about Boglins is on the back. It's like, here's the family tree, and you're a biologist, and here's the field notes.
Yeah.
And so maybe you could tell me that story. Before
Yeah, when I was doing a show, and this really tall gentleman with a big beard walked over with his wife and kids, and he said, you're responsible for my career. And I said, oh, are you a toy designer or a puppet builder or something, or you're in special effects? He goes, no, I'm a biologist, and when I was a kid, I got a boglin, and I was fascinated by the back of the box and how the boglins were related and the family tree. And he said that got me interested in Darwinism and evolution. And he said, I just was amazed by, the links throughout history from one creature to the next, to the next, to the next. And I said to him, oh, so like, what are you doing now? And he said, I'm studying snails in Jamaica and the relationship between the saltwater snails in the water around Jamaica and the land snails. And so, it's like,
Slimy.
believe me, that's the last thing I thought of when I was working on boglins, that I was going to influence, future biologists.
Yeah,
but
we
I'm
see this all the
glad.
time with Lemore's work. People are, she may have released a kit 10 years ago, and that 10-year-old's now 20.
Yes.
They're an engineer, or they're like, oh, you just got that job at SpaceX, or like, oh, I'm working on this or that, and you don't really think about the impact you can have at the time.
Right. Right.
And this was one of those things where, like, this was in mass media and mass culture. So I showed the ad, but you also you were big in Japan, so I want to show the ad from Japan.
Okay.
I'm Boglin. Boglin. そしてゾンビーズ
Being ahead of the times.
Yeah, they had a rap song and everything. And then I have a few more things because I remember, like, boglins were kind of everywhere. So you had a 900 number?
Yes.
900, so
I had nothing to do with, believe me.
It's a little bit like, okay.
I remember it coming out and going, what the hell? Where did that come
Yeah,
from?
so I have the ad. But it was neat because you call the 900 number, because we didn't have the internet. They call the 900 number, you get these holographic things. They also had a cause that they would donate to, and the boglins would do stuff. So let's play that as well.
Hi, I'm a boglin. Me and my buddies want to be your friend, right, guys? Right. Call us at 1-900-909-5464 and hear how we can protect you from ferocious beasts. And help you get your grades on math tests. Yeah, new story every day.
One call gets you a 3D boglin hologram like this.
4 calls get you a set of 6. Trade them with your buddies.
And part of your $2.35 2-minute call goes to Special Olympics.
So get your parents' permission and call us at 1-900-909-5464. Don't get the phone. I said get it.
There's only one phone.
It kind of reminds me of when Soupy Sales was on when I was a kid, and jokingly he said, hey kids, go to your mom's wallet and pull out $1 and send it to me here at the studio. Well, he never thought in a gazillion years kids would do it.
Yeah.
But they actually did it, and it got him kicked off the air because of it.
Now we have the App Store.
And now there's Facebook, and it's even worse. So I'll take a Soupy Sales over a Mark Zuckerberg any day. So with more boglins going on. So field notes. Did you come up with some of the history of these?
No, I'm pretty much sure that was generated at Mattel. I don't remember. Maureen may have done some writing of storyline stuff, but.
And then these other ones, they're the small boglin species.
Yeah.
So these are like the finger puppet ones.
Well, they're the smaller ones, like this guy. This is Grumpf, who I more recently released, and he's based on the very first small boglin that we presented to Mattel. It's almost exact copy.
Got it.
And
So these are just rubber. They have no hard plastic in them. Is that what makes
just the
them?
eyes,
Just the eyes.
and those are.
And they're not controllable. So this is
No,
kind of
you just manipulate it with your fingers.
Puppets. And then here's some of the boxes.
Yeah.
So I have a small collection of boglins. There's some that are available, and then there's some that are really rare. So the rarest one, I think you were saying, is
the Halloween ones.
And why is that? Why is this so rare?
I think because they were only issued. I'm not sure if they were issued in Europe later on, but they were primarily issued in the States. and it was just like a short run
Got it.
at Halloween, so they're the hard, like one of the harder ones to find. There are other ones that were produced in Europe that were done in very small quantities, and they're difficult to find also. But it's only European collectors know about them.
Yeah.
The U.S. collectors don't know about it as much.
So, other question is, there's only so many people on planet Earth that are living that have something they made or created on eBay that's way more expensive than when it came out. So I was looking for Boglins on eBay.
Yes.
I'm just like, let me see, Tintin stuff on. Let me see what's going on. $800, $900, $1,000, $1,200. Mint condition tags. Some of them are in great shape. $500.
Yeah.
Do you have a whole collection in the basement that you're like
I have
Boglin coin that you're sitting on? like what?
I have a lot of the originals.
Yeah.
I don't have all because there were some produced in Europe that I never got samples of. We were supposed to get samples, but I never did. So
Yeah.
I have some stuff that was never produced.
So secret Boglins that never made the cut.
Yeah,
Just like-
like one is like an action figure Boglin, but it's a lot of parts,
Got it.
and you can pose it in all these different
Wow,
positions.
that's
And
kinda cool.
I would like to bring it out eventually. We'll see.
Yeah, I mean, you have a pretty rockin' Instagram. Maybe
Yeah,
put it
and
up there.
and it's
See the
things are
interest
going
level.
well, and I'm looking to continue doing new things. I've got more ideas than I have time.
Oh, yeah.
And then there was, yeah.
You know the
yeah,
feeling.
Yeah,
No, I mean,
walk
that's a
right
good
here.
thing. It's like somebody was talking to you last night. He was like, I have this costume and I feel bad I haven't finished it. And I'm like, don't feel bad you haven't finished it. Feel happy you're not bored.
Right.
So then
Right.
there was a whole group of extra Boglin things. So that I imagine that there's there's the box Boglin, and
Yes.
then how do we have something even cheaper and easier to manufacture to get more out there? So there was Boglin stamps.
Yes.
So you give this to someone that you like or don't like.
Right, and there was a mask
Yeah.
that was
Oh,
on
there was
the
a
back.
mask.
Yeah, there was a cutout paper mask on the back of, I forget, one of the cereal boxes.
Corn Pops.
I have
I
one.
forget which-
I have one
I forget
cereal ad,
exact-
so I wanted to play that.
Okay.
Because YouTube is YouTube. I'm just like,
Yeah.
I type in Boglin, and I'm like, oh wait, look at all this great stuff. So here's a
You did a better job of finding stuff than I have.
here. Yeah, this is the Pops commercial.
Part of this complete breakfast,
I gotta have my pop.
you can let someone know how you feel with the Boglin Stamper. Free Boglin Stamper in Corn Pops.
All right, so that was a free Boglin stamp
Yeah.
for Corn Pops.
Yeah.
And then this sketch, I saw this you did in '92. This was for another type of
Yeah,
Boglin. This is
wiggling
a
tongue.
tongue Boglin.
And that was actually produced in Europe. There are
Okay.
wiggling tongue Boglins in Europe.
Interesting.
And as Boglins had changed, there was always these instructions. So there's the eyes that go back and forth. Mm-hmm. And then, actually, we can go to the overhead. I have a set of the original eyes. These, I got this Boglin off eBay, and the eyes are already falling out. I'm like, perfect. I can use that for this. So, did you work on this mechanism? Is this something that the toy designers worked on?
No, this was I think we later on did some moving eyes, but it wasn't like this. I had done them as cable controlled.
Got
Yeah.
it.
And Mattel came up with this mechanism.
This is a nice mechanism.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's clever.
to make them move back and forth.
I mean, I think it's
And
all
then-
snap fit together.
Yeah, then there was a lever that you could push the
Yeah.
back up and down to make him blink. And it's relatively okay. Unfortunately, the plastic is a little brittle.
Yeah.
It gets brittle as it gets older.
This is why I was able to get a couple cheap ones because they
And
were
I
open.
have been playing around with, doing a better design that's more,
Oh, look at that.
and that's this is 3D printed, but the cost of injection molding these things is crazy.
Because of the
Even to
complexity?
print this,
That still hasn't changed.
Yeah,
Things that haven't changed since the 80s.
Yeah.
Injection molding is
yeah,
expensive.
it's still really expensive, and it's a lot of parts, but maybe someday we'll
Yeah.
see.
Yeah.
I'm hoping.
And then,
And then this is the one I did more recently, which is a lot simpler. It's just direct for the new Cyclops
Yeah.
bottle.
Yeah.
But it's really effective, and I got, it's like the thing is, sometimes I get locked into, Muppet thought. You could never do this for television because of the glare coming off the clear plastic. So then when I got past that, I said, oh, I finally found these clear plastic spheres that I can then put another sphere inside
can you
to
just see the
mimic
back? Because it was show people
Yeah,
the
it's
back.
just a little plastic pin.
Yeah, now you just have to be okay with like Instagram influencers and YouTube and iPhones.
Whoop.
Very different. Very different than live television or TV.
Yeah.
So then I had this. So people have tattooed themselves with Adafruit logos and some of the stuff, and we're always like, "That's great. I hope everything works out with us because you get this tattoo." But there's Boglin tattoos all over the place.
Yeah.
When I searched on Instagram, I thought I would see a bunch of the collections. I also saw a lot of the tattoos. So if people come up to you at events and you're like, "I got my Boglin ink."
I've seen them on Instagram, but I don't think I've met anybody yet that has one.
Okay, well there you go.
But,
next
I'm
time
sure it'll happen at some point.
And then you were talking about there was a European one. So this is I got a photo of the back of the box. So this is
These came out in 2000, I think.
okay, fairly recent.
Yeah, well, 20 years ago,
Yeah.
almost 20 years ago now. So they were not publicized well. They had light up sights and sounds, they called it, kind of thing on the ones on the bottom, and then Mr. Mucus squirted water out of his nose, and then Warty had bubbled up warts on his back that was a
popped
softer.
out. Yeah.
No, it was just a really soft rubber that you could pull up and it would snap back, and then the one on the top had eyes that popped out of his head on little stalks.
It's like the first time maybe electronics were in there.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it was, and unfortunately the electronics at that time in the batteries case was so big, it kind of made it impossible to use it as a puppet. It was kind of counterproductive.
Yeah, only until like now can you do things with lipo batteries that are very thin, and we'll talk about that. In a minute. But I wanted to fast forward to some of the things that you're working on now. So here's like a bat Boglin, and this is how you still do your process.
Yes.
You're not doing 3D CAD and 3D printing. Looks like you were experimenting with ice, but you're doing clay and latex and more of a traditional mold making. It seems.
It's Chavant NSP, which is non-sulfur clay, so that it doesn't react with the silicone rubber molds. And I sculpt them all by hand, and then make the negative mold out of silicone, and then I'm casting the new Boglins in vinyl.
And this is some of the bat
Yeah, that's him going into the mold.
And then you hand paint these?
Yeah.
And is this what type of paint? Is it an airbrush or like?
No, I actually had to invent the paint because the vinyl is such a it has such a elongation that you need something that will stretch as much as the surface. Right. So I kind of engineered a paint out of a liquid vinyl that is solvent based, and then
it's just like a colored cement. Because it's like it reacts with it and it glues into.
Yeah, it basically adheres itself to the existing rubber.
And I saw some of these. It looks like you have some additional Boglins.
Yeah, that was an idea I had from back in the 80s. Is I always wanted to do like this punk rock crazy, band, and that was quite successful. And I just found miniature instruments to attach to them.
Yeah, the other thing that was happening around that time was the Chuck E. Cheese's robotic pizza places.
Yeah.
It was like what was in the water in like '85? There was something going on where it was like this explosion.
Well, it's
of
very
ideas.
common in the toy industry that somebody starts something and then everybody else mimics it in one way or another.
Yeah,
it may not be direct, but they realize the potential and the possibility of that kind of product line.
Yeah.
So, and sometimes it's a glaring ripoff. It's like
it
just depends on the company and whether they want to risk being sued or not.
We saw the toy documentaries on Netflix, and the He-Man one was the best because it's like we had all these extra tigers and we paid for the mold.
Right.
It's a green tiger.
Right.
And like you could tell, and you could see, and they showed the the different figures, and clearly you could see where they already had extras left over.
Right.
So like, make it green, make it blue. Okay, now it's Skull Guy. You know, so and that's interesting. Interesting industry. And then this is some of the newer ones that you're working on too, and you brought.
Yeah, this is an anglerfish.
Okay.
So that's the clay sculpt, and then that's a glow in the dark one.
Let's see. Let's go to this here.
And here he is.
Oh.
Yeah, that's nice. Yeah, there.
It's interesting that the rubber. So what kind of rubber is this? What material?
This is vinyl.
This is
That's
vinyl.
vinyl.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's so soft.
Yeah.
And you're
Usually
making
vinyl is
these, and you're
harder.
making these one at a time. These are handmade, made in USA.
They're all made in the USA, all handmade by me.
All right. Hey, we're the last of our kind. We make electronics.
I know it's remarkable that you're doing it here.
And you have in the vinyl, you have like little sparkles embedded in it. So
glitter.
You make your own vinyl
And I mix the glitter in, and then I pour it, and
All right.
And then how does it cure? Like how do you just
it's because it's vinyl, it's a temperature.
you just heat it up?
Yeah, you heat it up, and then it gets poured, and it.
Okay.
And then,
then you embed the eyes right before or
After.
afterwards?
Yeah.
Okay. And then these are also some mini little.
Yeah, that's the
Boglins.
Grumps.
Whole collection.
Oh, I like this. Is the colorful gradient effect. It's really nice.
Yeah. And then this is my order. I ordered one of these. I'm a customer. And you delivered it here. This is the best. This is the best postal service I've ever got.
Right.
And
Izod.
Yeah. So this is the Boglin Imps, and this is
Wild caught.
Yeah.
Freshly delivered.
Yeah. And did you get this out of the Hudson?
Yeah.
I saw that you kayaked. So one of our team members was like, oh, maybe you can ask about did Boglins come from the Hudson? So
That'd
the
be a
new
good
ones.
story.
You know what's really funny is that recently, and I didn't make this connection, but that in Ireland they have the boglands,
Yeah.
which are where they used to dig up peat, and they find people who were captured or
That's like the
you
guitar
know,
pits.
like
But
They
they
might like
Natural.
turn the soap or something like that too. They're like their
yeah,
bodies,
no, it's just like they'll find people who were, executed
yeah. They're
thousands of years ago who were
tossed in the bog.
tossed in the bog. So, it's just interesting that my father's side of the family is all Irish, and I ended up creating these creatures called Boglins.
Called Bogland, yeah.
So
And,
there's a new Cyclops, which I'll be shipping out this week.
Yeah, and then the story about how all this came up is we were doing our Adafruit, Adabox 13. We have a subscription service. Last year we did Halloween. It's a one-eyed little skull PCB. We're also maybe the king of Queen Gothy in electronics, and we always try to do really interesting artistic PCB design. It can't just be like a square green thing. That's boring.
Right.
It can be beautiful, so why not? So we started this thing Adabox. We have about 4,000 or 5,000 subscribers, and they get a box every quarter. And Halloween's a big deal. And Halloween is the one holiday everyone agrees it's okay. Everyone can do something. Everyone can participate. And so we're like, we have to have really cool electronics. And then this year we made a mask called Monster Mask, and you can break the eyes apart and then use a cable between the two because we wanted to have eyes that can go on either side. But once we started doing this, the monster mask just happens to fit exactly inside of a Boglin if the eyeballs fell out. So what we did is this just fits in. You don't even need to do anything. And a lot of the Boglins, because they're like 30 years old, they the eyes. If you're going to get a new Boglin on eBay, you're looking at $300 or $400.
Yeah.
But one where the eyes
are gone,
$20.
Yeah.
So I said some bids, but this is our.
It's wonderful.
So what's interesting is people they think like, oh, are the eyes? They do like eye tracking, but it's actually a random movement.
Yeah.
But as humans, we move our eyes so much anyways that it looks like a natural behavior.
Well,
you know
because
what I mean?
in so many cultures, it's actually not polite to
You
just
don't stare.
continuously look.
So they look
at
up,
one person.
and what's interesting is no matter what the mood is, if you move the rest of the face, you can elect emotion, even though the eyes
Yeah.
are having the same motion. You
So
know what I
did
mean?
you injection mold these?
No,
The
these
lenses?
are actually standard lenses.
Oh,
so
okay.
this is a plastic lens, and these
Oh,
are
okay.
used for.
It's a hemisphere, yeah.
It's just oh yeah. we
Yeah,
got these-
acrylic hemisphere.
Yeah, these are like $1 a piece,
Yeah.
and they're pre-molded, and they're used for.
You guys are
LED
so much
lensing.
like me, just like finding stuff.
This is laser cut. So this
Yeah.
outline. So what we did is, we have screens that are this size, and so
And
we found
mounted on top of
Yeah,
it.
we found the matching ones that do the best job with that, and then we laser cut this piece, and this is attached.
It's wonderful.
And we also got the
I love
new
it.
screens. So, by the way, that's yours. We're going to
Thank
give you
you.
some presents.
Yay.
Because before you go, I'm going to make you sign my Boglin box. But that's yours. Because we wanted to give you some ideas on some things that we're up to. And I thought it'd be cool. I'm a Star Trek fan. You can't help it.
And then you can customize the eye design.
I thought we'd do something like
Yeah.
Boglin, like maybe you 3D print something that fits onto a Boglin, so you can have half robot, half Boglin. You know,
Yeah.
Borglin. Yeah, I think
Like the Borg?
Yeah, Paramount.
The Borg Boglin.
Yeah, Paramount probably wouldn't like that too much, but we can deal with that. But then this is the ones without the lenses. And what's neat is these new screens that we have. You can look at them from any angle. So
Yeah.
we had not the live television puppet issue with glare. We have it's on video, or we're taking photos.
And the refresh
and the
doesn't
refresh
match.
rate.
It's not good enough.
You can see.
So you would see black lines because
Yeah, you know, you look
the-
at a television.
You'd have
okay.
mismatched
So-
refresh, but these new displays that are coming out for like smartwatches and stuff,
Yeah.
Yeah.
they're so good that they're 60 hertz refresh, so they're faster than the TV, and also they're from any angle.
Now the
they look pretty
lid,
good.
can you change the color?
Yeah,
Oh,
you
yeah.
can do
Yeah,
anything.
everything.
You can make
Yeah.
it iris that's like a cat eye. You can make
Right.
it animate.
Right.
So yeah, we actually Phil B, Paint Your Dragon,
wonderful.
who did this. Well, it was really funny because we had a friend a separate friend who didn't know him, and he was like, "Oh, I saw this eye code," and I was like, "I know, I'm going to take this, and I'm going to make it
the overhead there.
like really awesome and customized." And then when he actually looked at the design, he said, "Oh my God, the person who made this customized it so much. There's nothing I can improve because there's so many ways to. You can change like how
Yes.
bloodshot the eyes are,
Yeah,
the
yeah.
iris size,
So we already have like
iris color.
24 different eyeball patterns, and you
Yeah.
don't even need to know how to program. You could just press the button on there. And the other thing we added was this can do voice changing. So you speak into it, and then it changes your voice. And we'll show that later
Cool.
after we're off the air here. But we thought that would be a neat thing for kids or for anyone to make too, where you'd speak into the little microphone on your sleeve, and then we'd
Yeah.
also make, Boglin-like
Wonderful.
sounds.
I love it.
Yeah.
Yeah, he actually made. What's funny is he made these eyes. The person who designed this Paint Your Dragon,
Yeah.
he did this because he was doing a lot of costuming and monster design, and he goes to
Right.
like Monster Fest, and he was like the eyes on masks. It's not that they look like dead, but it's
I
like
can't wait to take this
just a
to,
little bit of motion makes the whole experience.
Designer Con.
Yeah, well, I was going to
In
say.
November, I have Designer Con. People are going to flip.
Yeah, I was going to say, because I saw your booth that you have.
Yeah.
Just set up one of the Boglins with this.
Yeah,
And
they're going to
people are
love
gonna
it.
go nuts.
They are.
And so, by the way, everyone, we're going to talk to Tim after this, because this is for the world and to see this video. But we have some ideas for Tim on maybe some Adafruit electronics that can go into to puppets as well.
And
Very cool.
yeah, like you
Yeah.
can add a joystick to do iris control if you want, but actually a
Really?
lot of people like to have it random because it's like one less thing they have to think about. I'm gonna tell
awesome.
Phil's B story because he went to like a Monster Con. I don't know which one it was.
Yeah, one of our
There's a lot.
we call our team creative engineers. So there's another Phil on the team. I've been only trying to hire Phils, but there's only a few of us, and so he is our creative engineer.
Because they fill in really well.
They do. Fill in a gap.
Yeah, he was walking around with one of these, and he actually set it up with a Pepper's Ghost, so the eyes actually reflect into his eyes. And
Yeah.
and he actually went and met. He just coincidentally he bumped into this like kind of famous mask designer who makes custom rubber masks.
Right.
And the designer was just so in love with the eyeball mask that
Yeah.
he said, "I want to buy that." And Phil B said, "Well, it's not for sale. You have to make it. It's like DIY." And he's like, "I'll trade you."
Right.
And he traded like a sweet demon full vinyl head mask for the eyes. And he's just like, "Man, I got a good
Very
deal."
cool. Very
So
cool.
so I think it's again like you said, it's when you came up with this gross stuff, it's something new. Like nobody had been doing gross toys.
Yeah.
And once it started, like it was like all 80s, 90s,
Yes.
So
all
here's-
gross.
Yeah.
Here's the Pepper's Ghost. So it's the same eyeballs, but you can see that they're
So that's actually what it looks like in real life because it has a Pepper's Ghost effect that reflects it onto his eyes.
That is wild.
So go to the in action because it has the videos.
So you can see it here. And then same monster mask. So what we wanted to do is have a platform for anyone who wanted to do eyes. You could still split them across. The nose in the middle is boopable, so when you boop it, it makes the eyes cross. And this is what it looks like when you're putting them in action. So it's one of those things where like none of us are puppeteers, but
And this is the
what
first one.
happens. Yeah.
So if you get the angle right,
So you can have a hat.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's being reflected from
the
the
eyes of
hat
from the hat down, and it's
into your
exactly
eyes.
the same distance, and so it basically becomes a teleprompter, but for everybody else.
Amazing.
Yeah.
That is amazing.
So it goes on.
You guys,
and
well, hopefully I'll be at Monsterpalooza again next year. Definitely got to show this at Monsterpalooza. They'll love it.
Yeah, it just adds a little bit of more fun. This is we think it's interesting how you can use electronics. It's actually not a very complicated piece of electronics, but it adds a lot of life.
Yeah, and it's the your imagination in how you're applying it. You're thinking out of the box.
All right, so I want to do a plug for all your stuff. Tim, where will you be? Oh, you want to show a couple other things real fast?
What else do I have to show? Well, I mean, this is one of the Halloween versions that I did of Grumph.
Okay, so Return of Halloween theme.
Yeah, and he also is orange, but he glows green. It's got glow in the dark because I've been playing around with all these different pigment powders, raw pigments, and so this is a combination of an orange pigment powder and the glow in the dark part.
We have UV LEDs that we should show you because that'll make everything glow.
Yeah, that's fun.
Yeah.
We also got thermochromic
And
pigments that are.
I don't know, and then it's like I'm always playing around with new ways of making eyes move.
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah.
So I don't know.
So you're also into eyes. We have a lot in common with eye
It's like-
technology.
and this is to try and figure out a different way of making replacement eyes because some people like to be able to manipulate by hand.
Yes.
Yeah.
So
I think there's a combination that you
I'm
can
always
do.
playing with different.
And there's
materials
capacitive
and
touch
tools.
now, so that the blinking eyes that are there, the little nose, if you boop the middle,
Let's see if the boop is working.
Yeah, if you boop the middle, and we have the boopable code.
I don't know if we.
See how they turn on they look inward when you do it.
Yeah.
Yeah, so there's all sorts of neat things that you could do with capacitive touch now.
Very cool.
As well.
You have to touch the middle,
The nose.
Well, on your site, there's a lot of stuff going on here.
Yes.
So people can go Boglins, Sectaurs, TOTIMS. I'd say there's a whole other show that maybe we can do one day with Sectaurs, which is these. That was also a really new idea. It's like, well, let's fly around on insects and that was very.
And then it was based on a hand puppet fly that I made where my fingers became the legs of the fly, and I didn't like wearing Halloween masks to Halloween parties because then you can't eat or drink. So I just made this fly that would come up and sit on people and just like the fur fabric of the fly would rub up against your face or whatever, and people would, it's disgusting, get it. Or I'd have him fly onto their food or their drink,
And you have your own line of TOTIMs. So
those are vinyl. Those are vinyl toys.
And then
those are hard vinyl.
Yeah.
And you also have a couple hand puppets.
Yeah, those are hand puppets that I did for a puppet show, traveling puppet show that my son was doing after he got out of theater school. And that's a doy bird, and it's an very old school kind of.
So next event, I assume you're going to have some light up Boglins because we're going to make sure you have those.
Yes.
Where are you going to be next?
Well, I'm doing a small show in Poughkeepsie, New York, right before Halloween. I think it's the last weekend in October.
All right.
But then I'm doing the big show out in LA.
Okay.
In Anaheim, Designer Con, which is
DesignerCon.
for all the, like guys like me who are still just designing stuff by hand and making it, on their own. They're not tied necessarily to big toy companies
Yeah.
and producing vinyl toys or resin toys or
Okay.
you know,
Well,
all kinds of
I'll
stuff.
bug you to email me the Poughkeepsie info so I can get on our blog.
Okay.
And then I'll introduce you over email to the other Phil, the West Coast Phil.
Okay, great.
Because he's in California. Maybe
Oh,
he can
good.
stop out and see you because he can maybe bring some of his eyes.
Yeah, that
and
would
show
be
you some
wonderful.
stuff. And you normally have a booth and some things going on at these.
Yeah,
these
well,
events?
that was at 5 Points in Brooklyn, I
Okay.
believe.
Oh, great.
And
And
if folks want to go to your site and order one of these, so I got one
yeah,
of
and
these.
then the other new one is, which is there is the moving bronze frame where the mini Boglins are all trapped into this flexible,
And you put your fingers in.
and you
can
put
move
your
it
fingers
around.
on in
this one?
behind it,
No, the one
and
to
you
the
can
right.
manipulate it.
Got it. So,
Those are mini Boglins. Mini Boglins
Awesome.
was big thing in Europe.
so this is a little frame, but it moves around when you.
Yeah, so
Oh,
it's
that's cool.
like they're trapped in there, but then you can push it in and out.
Yeah.
And then you just happen to have a pretty active Instagram, so people can follow you at Tim Clarke Toys.
Yeah.
All
And it's
right.
my whole history of the last, almost 40 years of designing toys and properties, so.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Tim, for coming by.
Yeah, it's
Thank
so
you.
fun. It's so gross.
And I'll say this, although I'm not a marine biologist, I will say I know I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing now if there wasn't something like Boglins in my life, something like Jim Henson that came
Right.
along, something
Right.
like reading that book Dune, like all those things together.
Mm-hmm.
You're walking around Adafruit. It's hard to avoid puppets here. You can
Yes.
see the things that happen.
Yeah.
But thank you so much for continuing to put all your work out there.
Thank you. I have to say I've been so impressed by what you guys are doing and how you're doing it. It's really remarkable.
All right.
All right, everybody. You
Okay,
have
see
enough
ya.
fun pops. Go pick up one of Tim Clarke's toys.
See you in Poughkeepsie.
These are way cooler.
Thank you.